my daughter just moved. I thought it would be cute for her to be right in the picture with me, but
No,
I guess
thanks.
she don't want to be seen with me. Uh, in all actuality, I am excited that you all are here, and unfortunately, I can't be there with you fully engaged because we're playing double duty, and I'm attending another call.
Rev's been having internet
They know
problems.
that you are in the hands of some experts to be able to get knowledge concerning jobs and justice. And I do look forward to hearing from you all and hearing the report outs. And listen, again, this meeting has already started, so I'm engaged in this meeting as we speak. I've got to run, but it's good to see those who are on the call, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, Rev. Hope your internet holds. Rev's been having internet trouble today, and Malaysia will be representing Rev on this call. We are recording for those who could not be in attendance tonight, but welcome everyone to tonight's From Resilience to Restoration, very special episode on jobs and justice. Normally, our Resilience to Restoration meetings, public Zooms, are held at this time, but on the fourth Thursday of every month. And we will have one on the fourth Thursday of this month. But we had so many good people and so much good information, we couldn't pack it all into one meeting. So I'm about to introduce our speakers for tonight. But before that, Jerry, would you like to give a quick sneak preview of the meeting that's coming up with your good friends on the fourth Thursday, the 27th?
Sure. Um, on the 27th, we'll be having a guest speaker, Dr. Ann Mallinger Birdsong, who's a pediatrician, and her focus has been on air pollution and health. And her line is clean air is healthcare. And that is her big line. She is with Mothers and Others for Clean Air, and also the collaborative, the Breathing Air Collaborative, which is a group of agencies and organizations committed to putting forth and educating and getting people involved in responding to EPA and legislative issues on particularly healthcare and pollution. She is an amazing woman. She's worked in the CDC. She's worked in a variety of capacities over time. And I'm hoping that everybody will be able to attend that. We will record it. Again, that's on the 27th and at 6 Central, 7 Eastern, which I always remember to say because I'm Eastern time. So please come to that, or if not, please look at the recording. It will be very helpful, and it puts forth another strategy for dealing with communicating to climate deniers and justice deniers about the issue, in that we're not focusing so much on we're not focusing so much on talking about climate change or injustice. We're focused on, this is what it costs for the healthcare. This is how many deaths could be prevented. And we're kind of looking at health, which is much more near and dear to people's hearts than climate change or environmental justice for the most part. So I'll pass it back to Kyle.
Thank you, Jerry. And I have the honor and pleasure of introducing two wonderful friends and colleagues of mine that I'm just amazed to work with and around and learn from. I will start with our former state representative, Patricia Todd. And I want y'all to, they're going to introduce themselves, tell you about the work that they're doing. They can introduce themselves better than I can. but I've just had the honor and pleasure of interacting with Representative Todd on several justice related issues over the years, and she is a unique resource for Alabama in so many ways. We are so lucky to have her. And likewise with my good friend Kathleen Kirkpatrick, whom I'm known from Green Building days. We could really start down a rabbit hole of our former lives. But I'm really anxious for her to tell you about her current uh, job with the Capacity Collaborative. So without further ado from me, let me turn it over to Kathleen and Patricia, and whichever of you would like to go first on this.
I think Patricia's going to go first because what she's going to go over is going to sort of set the tone for what I'm going to bring up.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, it's good to be with y'all. And Kyle's going to pull up my slide deck so can walk through with you all what we do. I work for an organization called Jobs to Move America. We're a national organization. We're based in LA, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Mississippi, and Alabama. And next. And we mostly target in the green economy manufacturers who sell their equipment to a government entity or receive economic tax incentives. And because we know in the green economy that, like, you know, there are electric buses, there are electric cars, and all kinds of things that are now coming forward. And our theory change is around a benefits, community benefit, a little bit about that. So next. What we know in the South is we've been aggressively recruiting manufacturers to move to the South using tax incentives and exemptions. We have lower wages than other country. We have very anti-union tax law. The many of these manufacturers use, there's lower cost of living, and there's a business friendly laws in the South, including right to work. So next. We've seen in Alabama, when I was in the legislature, one of the things that concerned me, I said on the Education Budget Committee, is the amount of economic tax incentives we were given to manufacturers to locate in Alabama, at the tune of over $8 billion since we started doing incentives. We have a high poverty rate. Almost 17% of our population lives in poverty. That's higher than the national average. You know, we rank last in the nation in education attainment. We're the 10th most polluted state in the United States, and we have a lack of access to resources around worker education and community education. And we rank worst in the U.S. for health and wellness, and the South has become the low wage alternative to China. Next. So, you know, we already talked about this before, but we spend a lot of money on economic tax incentives in Alabama. You'll read about it in the newspaper, of ribbon cutting, or, oh, you know, this car manufacturer is going to move to Alabama, but you never know the fine details of what the state's given to them. So we'll go to next. I think that's a duplicate slide, but. So our theory of change revolves around a community benefits agreement. We won the first one in Alabama last summer with New Flowers, an electric bus company in Anniston, and they're one of the largest electric bus companies in the nation. And we, through a legal challenge and a lawsuit, got them to the table to negotiate the first community benefits agreement, and Kathleen was part of this process. And it's a legally enforceable contract. It's not an MOU. It's not a handshake. It's a signed contract, and it includes wage floors, but importantly, targeted worker recruitment. So we require them to recruit X amount of workers from system impact communities, people of color, people who've been previously incarcerated. And it also requires them, should the employees want to form a union, they remain neutral. So we signed that agreement with them last summer. It sort of gives a level playing field for workers and communities to be heard in the process. We developed a pre-apprenticeship program where the people who go through our pre-apprenticeship program get higher priority to be hired into New Flyer. I think we placed like maybe 30 workers there so far. And it really has worked out well. New Flyer says that they had better workers coming through the doors through our apprenticeship program they've had in any other program. So it's like a win-win for them. Next. So one of the things we offer is Alabama worker rights training. So workers can understand what their rights are in the workplace, how to report any kind of violation, safety violation, wage violation, discrimination. And one of the things that our CBA requires is we have a neutral party that's a 1-800 number that a worker can call and report discrimination. And we give them, legal resources in order to fight that to challenge that discrimination. We talk about pay and wages, workplace safety. We actually offer OSHA 10 training to workers. And when COVID was affecting all of us, we did a lot of training around your rights under COVID. And the end goal is to build worker power. And next, the next step for us at this New Flyer, and we're about to launch some other campaigns using the same model, is that one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we sort of soften the turf for a union to go in and organize, because we all know that union jobs are better in manufacturing than if you work for a manufacturer where there's no union representation. So that's sort of how we target or develop our campaigns. The Communication Workers of Alabama is in the process of starting to organize at New Flyer. New Flyer doesn't know that yet, so please don't tell them. Because we're not there to form a union. We're just trying to educate workers about the benefit of working in a union environment. We all know by looking at labor statistics that you get a higher rate of pay. You can't be fired at will. You have a bargaining group that's going to bargain on what your wages and benefits are. And it's a safer environment to work in. The union protects people in the workplace. So we're actually looking at other campaigns around the state. This is all in the green economy. So we're looking at car manufacturers who are going to be building electric cars, or other manufacturers who are engaged in, any kind of green economy. Next, that may be the last one. I'm not sure. So, why does this matter? Well, we believe in protecting workers in the workplace and giving them a path of activism and advocacy. And we want to make sure that every job's created through these economic tax incentives are good jobs and paid. And the community should be taking part in conversation when it comes to engaging employees, especially when they receive public dollars. So we sort of have that leverage over them. So we have to reimagine and redefine Southern worker narrative as we move into the new green economy. It includes good jobs that are good, paying, safe, competitive with other states, pro-union, and it includes a leadership for all. Next, that may be it. Yeah. So that's a little bit about what we do. And Kathleen served on the coalition. when we negotiated the community benefits agreement, and we're going to take this model to other parts in manufacturing. So that's it for me. I look forward to any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Kathleen.
Okay, it's great to be here. Thanks, Patricia, for kicking things off. I'm going to try to share my screen here and not fumble through this too much. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my very basic slides. I don't have nearly as many as Patricia. I just wanted to have something to kind of carry us along. So my name is Kathleen Kirkpatrick. I'm the program director for a new organization called the Capacity Collaborative. And the Capacity Collaborative was formed last summer, last fall officially, as a co-op of nonprofits of sorts. I know a lot of people in the environmental justice movement, like Kyle and Rev and others, and folks all around the country who were really interested in getting involved in helping environmental justice and small disadvantaged is the word that the federal government uses, disadvantaged communities access the federal funds and this huge tidal wave really of infrastructure and other associated money that's now becoming available. So we formed the Capacity Collaborative to go after a big, huge contract with the Environmental Protection Agency here in the Southeast. And lo and behold, we scored really well on that, but we didn't get it. By which point I was already so committed to this cause that I left my previous job to do this anyway, even without that massive EPA contract. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that we didn't get that in retrospect, because it's allowed me more flexibility and less of the sort of bureaucratic approach to working with communities, and I can be more, in many ways, more strategic. But as you'll see here, I'll just sort of read you our tagline. The Capacity Collaborative is a network of primarily Southeastern nonprofit grassroots organizations that came together to catalyze, I love that word, catalyze, I'm a chemical engineer by training, to catalyze environmental and energy justice through training, technical assistance, and capacity building. I'm located in Montgomery, Alabama. That's one of the reasons I know Kyle, because I'm right here in Alabama. And I will say that even though we are a collaborative, I am the sole employee as of now, but really with the idea of me being able to identify opportunities for our entire network to help environmental justice communities and communities that want to operate more sustainably. And as y'all probably know, communities can be geographically like-minded groups, an arrangement of people. Communities can be a geographic representation, like a town, or even like an industrial complex, harkening back to some of what Patricia was talking about. But I just wanted to give you a sense for some of the things that we're already beginning to engage in, even though I've only been doing this for a few weeks. I feel very strongly about making sure that any approach to finding solutions for sustainable communities is centered on people. I mean, that's really where it begins, right? You can go out and I don't know what that was, but you can go out and identify opportunities for communities that are interested in becoming more sustainable, finding the good jobs, because that's part of the sustainability, right? But we're really kind of rooted in technical assistance. My colleague, Sarah Diefendorf, who some of you may know from the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, Sarah's been providing technical assistance for very small towns and specifically around water and wastewater for quite a few years. And we're sort of expanding that model, but specifically targeting environmental justice communities and helping them identify sources of funding or technical assistance or other resources to quickly meet their needs. And with this deluge of federal assistance becoming available, we want to make sure that the people on the ground who really need that, oops, I think I've got things out of order here. I'm just going to go back and keep talking a little bit. You can just erase that out of the recording, right, Kyle? Yeah. Yeah, but
Edit is our friend.
okay, that's right. But Sarah's been, and another colleague of ours, Elaine McCarty, have been providing technical assistance to water and wastewater challenged communities all over the world for a number of years. And we saw the opportunity to expand that effort to other types of issues. So we're already doing some community workshops here in the Southeast, coincidentally. We recently did one in Anniston, Alabama, where the New Flyer CBA was negotiated. That may or may not be by coincidence. I had gotten to know about the community and in the Anniston area and was really intrigued at the thought of using CBAs in a slightly different way. So Patricia described how a community benefits agreement can start with a little leverage associated perhaps with some controversy or some an employer who's a bad actor. I really want to increase our awareness and our understanding of the ability to use a community benefits framework as a proactive way to increase economic development, jobs opportunities, to make a community more sustainable, even if it already is. So imagine taking a community benefits agreement where you develop a network of stakeholders, community leaders, perhaps even including their local government or the local, economic development entity or even the Chamber of Commerce. And you get everybody to the table in the community who cares about making their community better, and you get a community benefits agreement drafted. And through the course of that discussion, I mean, this is not something that happens in a day or a week or a month. It takes time to build a consensus. And all of the stakeholders who are party to the agreement don't necessarily need to agree on everything, as long as you agree on the end goal to bring better jobs and a more sustainable community to your area. Maybe you get the local government involved, but it's not necessary. And an MOU can really be, or not, excuse me, not an MOU, a CBA is like an MOU, and that you can get other parties involved to the extent you do or don't want to. But I would really encourage you to all think about bringing as many people to the table as you can, so you can work in concert together with one another to achieve your end goals, which in theory would be to attract the sort of employers, the sorts of manufacturers that you want to your community, rather than finding out after the fact that a lease agreement has been reached with a battery manufacturer and your county commission or your other local entities and government have given away your tax base. Why not say, hey, we are all in agreement that we want jobs that are, good paying jobs with benefits. We want to make sure that there's no harm unnecessarily done to the environment, and that corporate businesses aren't continuing the sort of exploitation of people and natural resources in the environment, especially the sort that we've seen here in the South for hundreds of years now. So that's my approach to CBAs. I have looked around and I don't believe anyone has actually done that on the sort of grand scale that I'm talking about. But I decided to focus a few years ago on rural communities and small communities, maybe even like neighborhoods within a small town, because these are the sorts of areas where people have already learned to work together for mutual survival, for mutual benefit. So the idea now is to take the CBA approach, and in this amazing time that we have with federal resources available, some coming directly to the communities, others going through state agencies and various state programs, but we can leverage this opportunity to really make things happen of benefit to our communities by working together with our neighbors. So that's the idea. Now, if we were to apply that, and when I want everybody to sort of expand their thinking about what is a green job. There are some things that are obvious, like manufacturing solar panels and wind turbines, doing weatherization, building electric cars, and definitely meets the definition of that some folks have as a green job. But is it really a green sustainable job if it doesn't pay a living wage, if it doesn't provide benefits, and it's in an unsafe environment? I mean, if we're going to hold corporations and other employers to account for what they're calling green jobs, they need to know what a green job really is. And I think it's incumbent upon us, on individual members of the community and people like us that we bring into the movement, to advocate for the sorts of jobs that we want to see. And if we don't, the folks that Patricia was talking about, who blow into town, already have a plan and have gotten our tax money. I think it's kind of stealing our tax money, to be honest. That's going to continue to happen. So along with the advocacy for approaches like this for sustainable communities, we've got to rely on lawmakers in roles like Patricia used to be, to really make the policy happen to support it. So that's why we're very concerned in Alabama. Patricia mentioned this a little while ago, about transparency in government. And this goes all the way from the state down to the very local level. If our money, our tax money, is being spent to attract new businesses or development of new businesses, we should have a say in that. And a community benefits agreement is a good way to do that. So that's a few ideas and concepts that I've been working on. I really want to get everybody thinking about how all of the money that's coming to our communities, or they're possibly coming to our communities from things like the infrastructure bill, that those are spent wisely. Our states and even our counties could have oversight committees to develop relationships with community members. And Tara, I see your hand raised. We're going to come around to questions here in just a few minutes. But hold your questions just for a couple more minutes, and then we'll come back around to it. After our session tonight, I've been taking notes, and then I'm sure there will be more during questions. But I've made a commitment to provide a list of resources that you can begin educating yourself about. But you can always reach out to me and people like Patricia at Jobs to Move America. There are Kyle and others at People's Justice Council, because these folks are all clearly bought into these concepts, and we want to make it happen, especially here in the South, where there's such a history of exploitation of people and resources. We want to make things better, and we have a huge opportunity ahead of us to really leapfrog the sorts of appearances on worst of lists, like Patricia mentioned. We have the worst health, education, and health outcomes of most of the states, and we very often appear at the bottom here in Alabama. And I don't know the statistics on some of the other Southeast states, but I'm rapidly learning some of the characteristics in other Southeastern communities. And one of the things that we can do is look to neighboring states who have things that they have done well. For instance, there's also a CBA in Nashville around the development of a sports arena. I know there have been some CBAs in the Atlanta area, and Atlanta actually has several EcoDistricts that have developed in the last few years. EcoDistricts is another approach that uses an agreement like a CBA with affordable housing developers, as a for instance, or for an entire district like around the Atlanta airport has an EcoDistrict, if I'm not mistaken. But use people like me and Patricia as a resource to get you started. The Department of Energy actually published some very good guidance for community benefits agreements with the development of things like solar farms and renewable energy projects in mind. It may not surprise you that a former JMA staffer had a hand in that, which I think is very cool. Another good resource for you that's continuing to develop, and you may not be able to find very much yet, but when it comes to accessing federal funding and finding technical assistance to apply for some of these federal grants, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has set up these both regional and a couple of national organizations called the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers. You'll see this Thriving Communities terminology being used now by a lot of the federal agencies, but the TIC-TACs, as they're called colloquially, are actually designed to help get federal funding to environmental justice communities in adherence with the commitments for the J40 initiative. If you want to learn more about J40, talk to Kyle, because I know that the People's Justice Council and at least one of our participants here tonight have been part of the Justice 40 cohort. And the whole principle behind that is again, making sure that environmental injustices in disadvantaged communities are overcome. And as I said, you even have the potential to leapfrog the more sort of standard modes of operation here in the country, all over the country, but especially here in the South. So with that, there will probably be other resources after we get through all of this, and I will take note and I will get those to y'all for follow-up. But I think now we ought to take questions unless Kyle had something else on the agenda.
No, please. I want to hit it while it's fresh on folks' minds. So yeah, Tiara.
Okay, sorry about that. I was across the room. Kathleen, awesome info as usual. Congrats on getting that agreement in place. Actually, I think you had started to kind of give information on the question that I had, which is exactly what are your thoughts about creating these sorts of agreements on the construction side? Because of course, there's tons of construction that's going to come out of all the funds that's coming down, and there are going to be some pretty large construction companies that will be involved. So do you think it's possible, or under what circumstance do you think it may be possible that we can sort of, I guess, when we're building in these large projects, to sort of approach the groups that's doing that development side and just sort of putting that in there, especially if we can kind of get in on the planning phase, to sort of force those construction providers to, come in and sort of agree to some of these points that you have made, such as the median income that would be available, the certain number of people being hired from the community, that sort of thing. What are your thoughts there, or how easy do you think that might be?
So that's one of the reasons I like community benefits agreements. They can take a lot of forms. And as I said before, the best approach is to start very, very early. And you're sort of beyond the very early stage with your development area, but not quite to the, contract, all the contracts are signed and that all the stipulations are in. But like in I'll use an affordable housing development or like a neighborhood development, sustainable development project as an example. You could do things like make sure that there are provisions and contracts with builders that they use union labor and have an apprenticeship program. There's a huge deficit right now in construction labor, especially for folks who are knowledgeable about green and sustainable building approaches and methods with building materials, but ultimately, like I said, it's about people. we got to make sure that the people doing the jobs get the training they need to get a good job, and that employers pay living wages and offer benefits to take care of their employees. But it can go bigger than that too, because whoever owns the project or aspects of the project, and you can bring all of them in, you don't have to do it piecemeal, you could do it all in one big agreement if you really do it strategically, and get everyone involved to make that commitment to good high road, well, what we call high road jobs in the labor movement, good paying jobs with benefits that are safe or that have adequate safety precautions and environmental precautions. And you get it down in writing. And yeah, you've got to get attorneys involved ideally, but there's not any reason that folks can sit down at the table together, determine their shared goals, and insist on the things that they want to see. You could all, in addition to provisions about employment, you can insist on a certain percentage of green space, or that certain like red listed materials is what they're called in the green building movement. It's just like not using materials with over a certain category of emissions for formaldehyde. I'm just kind of pulling that out of the air, pardon the pun, but you know what I mean? It's like, don't use off-gassing vinyl materials, use metal, or an environmentally preferable material, use recycled materials. A lot of people don't realize, and when it comes to building development, that what we call embodied energy, it takes a lot of energy to produce new buildings and new materials. You might actually come out ahead on carbon emissions if you redevelop an existing structure. And in neighborhoods like what you're looking at in Inslee, Terry, you can do a combination of existing buildings, new construction, building improvements, green space, recreational space, flood management areas, and you can do it all in a way that's not just sustainable, but is actually restoring the environment and restoring people's health to improve conditions. And that's, one of the things I really had sort of like made a point that I wanted to bring up, because we're talking about from resilience to restoration, right? And I definitely hear that so much from Kyle and Rev and others, that we can do better than just sort of maintaining the conditions that we have now. We want to improve them, improve our environment, because that's going to be healthier and more sustainable and resilient for all of us. I hope that answers your question, but I think I went a little bit bigger.
Well, and let me just say, Tara, we are working with this. One of the things we're working on at JMA is we're working with the city of Birmingham on a local hire provision on some of these construction jobs, so that when they get this structure money, that they'll pass a resolution that says a percentage of your, when they're issuing the contracts, that I don't know if it's going to be extra points or require the contracting, that you hire from high poverty, low income communities, and that you also have a percentage of employees that come from system impacted communities. The mayor and the city council are all in favor of that. We're trying to work out the details on the resolution. That is something that we're looking at too, is what's called local hire provision, so that it's city of Birmingham's money. They should be hiring people from the city of Birmingham into these positions. We're working with the laborers union on getting an apprenticeship program for people to come in and fill some of those positions. So that's some of the things that we're working on at JMA. But a great question.
Well, I will say that between what you and Kathleen just said, that is exactly sort of what I was looking for, as far as giving me some ideas on the guidelines. And that is absolutely awesome with what you're doing with the city of Birmingham. And if you don't mind, as you guys work through that, please let me know how that's working out and which contractors you're working with on that.
Okay, well, please send me your email. My email is ptodd@jobstomoveamerica.org. Kyle has it. I'd love to, have you included in this discussion.
Great, thanks.
The other thing I'll say is not all good jobs have to be things that are high tech or require an advanced education. When we talk about weatherization projects, I think everybody on this call probably understands what weatherization is. It's a way to get people's energy use and ultimately their energy bills down. And we can, like the We Rise program at People's Justice Council is really all about developing jobs with folks that are already in the community and then using that as a catalyst to create more jobs and to develop more skills and jobs that actually pay well so people can stay in their preferred community. One of the things that I run into a lot in rural communities is that folks are commuting, as much as an hour and a half each way. I know that's true with a lot of the big automotive manufacturing facilities in the South. What if those folks wanted to work closer to home, or they don't want to leave their hometown? Maybe they're caring for their older parents and have kids in school in a rural community. Let's give them some opportunities to get good jobs in their own neck of the woods and reduce their commute time so they can spend more time with their families.
And speaking of Tiara, and I also see Rev Richardson on the call. We're very lucky to have two of our resilience to restoration folk on this call, and as you might guess, they are working right here in the greater Birmingham area. Inslee and Enon Ridge are two projects we were just discussing today. In fact, Tiara and I. So Tiara, this would be a great time, especially since we're recording. If you wouldn't mind just giving a brief overview of what wonderful work you guys are doing in Inslee and Enon Ridge and other areas.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to kind of let everybody know what we are attempting to do. And that is continuing what BEAT has started over 30 years ago, which is building affordable and accessible housing in frontline communities. And we do that with a whole of community approach, which basically means that we understand that we have to add in jobs creation. We have to add in elements of economic development. We also have to bring in wraparound services to assist those folks that we're trying to put in housing. And also with the understanding that everyone will not be able to purchase a home or will not qualify to be able to purchase a home while they are in the process of trying to figure that out, whether or not that's going to be the best thing for them. We also provide rental housing. And so what we're doing is in an attempt to continue to do what we've been doing, which is building and providing housing in these neighborhoods, which is Enon Ridge and Inslee. We have also identified areas of what I've been calling regreening, and that's basically taking areas that have been affected by flooding as well as industrialization or just honestly abandonment, and taking a look at if those are areas that we need to honestly rebuild, or do we need to regreen in order to mitigate the effects of pollution in these frontline communities that we're working in that are basically right next to industrialization areas that are, still working. There's still steel being made. There's railroads still going and that sort of thing. And all of that pollution and particulates are affecting the members of that community. So that's why we're hoping to work with PJC and We Rise so that we can get the word out to the community, educate them, and then, build into our commitment to these communities to rebuild the housing, but do it in a sustainable way, as well as adding in that environmental piece to where we're going in and thoughtfully with academics such as yourself that's going to come in and tell us this is what needs to be planted. This is what's going to actually help these communities be resilient against climate change. Those are the sorts of things that we're looking to do in these two communities right now.
And I hope your ears were burning because just before we this meeting, as we were pre-planning, Kathleen and I were talking, and Kathleen was saying, "Yeah, your projects would be ideal for EcoDistricts." So we got to pick up that conversation offline.
Yes, please. I love what I was hearing there. And so I started pinging and in my head, like, oh yeah, this is gonna work really well with what we were looking at. So yeah, definitely let's get together.
Oh, very cool. Love to hear some other questions from folks out there. Please feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat, or just come off mute. Nikki, welcome. So glad to see you.
Hi, thanks, Kyle. My question is actually for Patricia. It's more of a logistical question. So I noticed that you guys have offices in New York and New Jersey. Do you do any work with lower mid-Atlantic states like Maryland and Virginia?
No, not yet. But we're expanding. We're actually looking going into Tennessee and possibly Georgia, and anything's possible. But I'd love to stay in contact with you and hear what you're doing that might interest us in those states.
Great, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead,
and
Jerry,
that is,
please.
how much resistance have you encountered with developers and builders? And then how do you overcome that when they're they're used to getting their own way?
Well, this is tough in Alabama. You know that because they don't believe in climate change or anything. But Kathleen's probably better at answering that than I am.
Well, I mean, this is why transparency is so important, and why I'm really trying to turn the tide on more typical approaches. Unless we can get our communities in the South organized before the development comes, we're always going to be in a reactionary mode. If we can be proactive and get our stakeholders together and get to the table with some people that we might ordinarily disagree with, but can find some common goals for the benefit of our community. And it's possible. It happens after disasters. People come together, work together to sort of get people's initial needs met, but then they all just sort of drift off back to their daily lives. We need to organize before the storm, because you know what? The storm is coming. I mean, it's technically already here with climate change. We can see it every day. And it's unfortunate that it's taken this long, for people to really, for more of the sort of general population to understand that climate change is a real thing and it's moving quickly. So, thankfully, we've got a lot of money coming. It'll never be enough. That's a roundabout way, Jerry, of saying, I think we're always going to be a little bit in reactionary mode. But if we can get more of our neighbors educated about these approaches to work together and prepare and attract the sort of development and the sort of manufacturing, the sort of jobs that we want, then we're going to be more successful. But I do think this is going to catch on. I'm beginning to see in like the information from DOE is a good example. They've already got CBA guidance on their website. And that tells me that there's going to be a preference for awarding funding to communities that are already in agreement internally about what they want to see and how they want to do business.
And there's a comment from Duffy Marie in the chat. I hope y'all can see. If not, I'll be happy to read it. Thank you, Duffy.
Let me just respond to Duffy here. Ford is getting ready to build a big plant outside of Memphis, and we're engaged with Ford in trying to negotiate a community benefits agreement with them. So I'm going to email.
While we're here tonight, folks, y'all got the A team. Well, I welcome other questions, comments as we're about to close, and I will honor everybody's time. And I will gladly stop talking when somebody has a question or a comment. But I'd just like to wrap up with saying, what is resilience to restoration for maybe some, I'm largely preaching to the choir here, I know, but we may have some new folks on this call, and for folks viewing this recording, which will be posted on our the People's Justice Council YouTube channel. Since you've registered, you should all get a link once the recording is up, or I'll post my email in the chat here soon. You can hit me up if you're missing anything or have any questions or follow up. But Resilience to Restoration, that is People's Justice Council, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light's first federal grant. The grant from the National Academies plural, of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And this grant is specific to the Gulf South. It's the Gulf State-oriented grant. And the title, as you might guess, is From Resilience to Restoration. And surprisingly, because both Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and People's Justice Council are interfaith organizations, surprising to us, the National Academies loved our approach, which is to reach out and meet with frontline community houses of faith, because many of y'all probably already know these houses of faith and frontline communities are already resilience centers. They are our fortresses against climate change and all the disasters we're talking. But we must move from resilience to restoration. We must shift the focus, because as the wise old coach says, you can't win if you play a purely defensive game. We need at least three kinds of restoration: ecological restoration, economic restoration, largely the subject of tonight's talk, and ecumenical or interfaith restoration to combat the toxic theology that is here in the South and the Bible Belt especially has brought us to this sad place. We need restorative theology as well. So that's the purpose of tonight's meeting, and I'll shut up there. But we've been talking about economic restoration, or in the case of frontline communities, let's be honest, we're not talking restoration. This is not Make America Great Again. This is elevating frontline communities to a position of economic power they have never benefited from, and that's why we're here. So, we pause for any last comments, questions, words of wisdom.
Hi, my name is Kate Cosnahan. I work with Alabama Environmental Council, and my day job, I actually work for a development firm, and I'm in their environmental department. So I'll do all of the pre-development environmental assessments of property, basically, to see if it's contaminated or not. And I'm just wondering, is anybody on the call, do you guys have any expertise in brownfields developments? And in your opinion, do you think those are beneficial for, underprivileged communities, I'll say, or, at-risk communities? Do you think, so far from what you've seen, are they a good thing, a bad thing? Do you have any opinions on that? And then another thing is with LDOT, have you had any conversations with LDOT as far as, or the state, as far as providing, financial incentives for companies to sustainably develop? Or is this purely coming from a private developer standpoint and applying for federal grants? I didn't know if there's anything on the state level that you've heard of or heard conversations about.
It tends to act. I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry. I feel strongly about this, but I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, yeah, I'm just, there's a lot. But yeah, I'd love to connect with you offline, whenever. But yeah, so basically what AEC is trying to do is we're trying to work with ALDOT on a project. We're trying to connect with some local developers that are larger developers in the state, especially like roadways, things like that, to try to use recycled glass, because that's a huge problem in Alabama is we don't have any manufacturers within the state that actually will take recycled glass. So if anybody has any information on that, but otherwise, like, we're going to go through some connections we have through AEC to try to reach out to private developers and people that, pave roads, work on those types of projects, to gauge their reaction basically to utilizing recycled glass, just because other states do use it. But for some reason, ALDOT does not allow Alabama to use recycled glass. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, is this like a political thing? But how could it be a political thing? But it's somebody somewhere is benefiting some way economically. But I'm just wondering, long term, how can we come across to manufacturers, to come to Alabama, number one, like bringing in more business, incentivizing them to come to Alabama because they have them in Georgia. I mean, there's a glass recycling facility there. Tennessee, they've got a lot of great sustainable businesses in Tennessee. So it's like, how do we bring them into Alabama and really tell them like we want them here, or incentivize them in that way?
That was a big question, and I think there's a lot of facets to it. And actually, we could, Kyle, I think we could actually just host an entire chat, just about all of that. But Kate, I don't want to discourage you from reaching out to developers, but if you work for a development firm, that development firms and architects and designers and engineers typically respond to what the client wants. Right. If the client happens to be the state's not going to ask for anything progressive because they're just going to maintain the status quo and get the cheapest project they can.
Right.
Kyle and I both have years
and
of
your main
experience.
opposition is the road builder.
Right.
The road builders are your main opposition. They don't want any restriction on what you do.
Yeah, much less any, and I don't think you're going to see much in the way of financial incentives unless we can build some of those requirements in probably at the federal level to actually require consideration of new approaches, what would be new approaches in Alabama. I know it's been done elsewhere, but we ran into this in the Green Building movement. I used to be the director for the U.S. Green Building Council for Alabama and Mississippi, and worked for both the state organization and also the national organization. And it's really interesting to see the disparities among different states and how they drive sustainability, even when we know that the life cycle costs are actually less for sustainable projects. But I'd love to have a conversation with you offline, Kate. And then, I mean, I do think this could be a good platform, Kyle, to sort of invite folks in for a conversation about, what does it really take to affect that kind of change? Sorry about my cats making noise in the background. They just busted into the room. I guess they're hungry, but yeah, let's have a conversation about these things. I think there's some lessons that like Patricia's learned in the legislature that I've learned in advocating for green materials and sustainable building approaches. And just other advocacy that we've done the last few years in Alabama, because I'm seeing things achieved in other states that do make sense. Like in Mississippi, you see a lot more distributed solar development, even on local government projects. And why we can't do that in Alabama is a policy reason. Yeah, it's a policy reason, not a practical reason. So it's a complex nut to crack. But I encourage you to reach out to developers to sort of get their thoughts on things. but I don't want to discourage you, but you're going to have a hard time even getting a response and getting, they'll say that they want to do these things, but ultimately it's up to the project owner to demand it. And that just to loop back, if our tax dollars are being used, we're the project owners, right? Not the
Yeah,
federal
Kate,
government, it's the people.
Ace,
So
I go
the
way
people have
back.
to demand it.
As you may have seen in the chat, I will be happy to follow up with you on that as well. So we are at the hour. I'm going to stop the recording. I want to thank everybody, but I'm also not going to rush anybody off. I'm happy to hang around here if anyone wants to keep asking questions or whatever. I don't know about our speakers, can't promise them, but I'm happy to hang around. But